Chung Xing regretted not seeing Zhang Luxi's long hair blowing in the wind that early summer, and also regretted that his student life in his previous life only ended in high school, never getting to experience the scenery of a university campus. The reason Chung Xing became somewhat impatient towards the end of his blind date after his rebirth was because before those 3 questions, the girl opposite him had asked, "I heard you didn't go to university." That was indeed one of Chung Xing's biggest regrets from his student days. So now that he's reborn, going to university is a must. He'll slowly reclaim his past youth. He'll strive to make his past regrets a thing of the past. The bell rang, signaling the end of evening self-study. Chung Xing closed his book and returned it to Zhou Yuan. Chung Xing had used the afternoon and evening self-study time to roughly read through the entire Chinese textbook. Evening self-study consisted of 2 periods, ending after 9 p.m. It was too late today, so Chung Xing planned to go to the Xinhua bookstore in the city tomorrow during lunch to get the missing textbooks for his first and second year high school students. After stretching, Chung Xing and Zhou Yuan followed the crowd out of the classroom. As soon as they left the classroom, several people approached them. "Brother Cheng," the leader called out. Chung Xing glanced at him. He remembered the man. His name was Gao Hai, from class 9 of the 3rd year of high school. He was doing well at the school, and his parents had some money locally. "What's up?" Chung Xing asked. "I need your help with something," Gao Hai said. "We'll talk about it later. Come over here first. You're blocking other people's way." Their group stood in the middle of the road, and no one else dared to pass. Chung Xing leaned against the railing beside the corridor, gesturing for them to come over. "What's wrong? Speak up." The classrooms at No. 1 Middle School didn't have air conditioning, nor did they have the constantly whirring ceiling fans. So, after sitting in the room for a while, it was still quite stuffy. The cool night breeze made it much more comfortable. "I had a conflict with Chen Yang from No. 9 Middle School. Only you, Brother Cheng, can help me resolve this," Gao Hai said. Ancheng has 9 middle schools in total, and No. 9 Middle School is undoubtedly the worst among them. These are things from a past life, and many students, influenced by gangster dramas or light novels about organized crime, though internet censorship is still relatively lax, yearn for that kind of life. But what if, years later, the environment improves and others are working smartly in high-end companies while you're still idly passing the time or doing factory work for a pittance an hour? Would you regret not studying harder or dropping out of school? Even Chung Xing, now a successful man, regrets not having gone to university in middle age. What about those who didn't finish elementary school or dropped out of middle school? At his high school reunion more than a decade later, Chung Xing rarely saw people like Gao Hai anymore. Most of his close friends from high school were doing poorly. They lost contact with him after his family tragedy in 2017. It's a harsh reality, and Chung Xing doesn't blame them. But after achieving success, he wouldn't help them the way he helped Zhou Yuan. "Go find Zhou Yuan. Chen Yang and Zhou Yuan have a good relationship. If Zhou Yuan is willing to help you, he will. If he isn't, there's nothing I can do," Chung Xing said. "Brother Zhou," Gao Hai said, smiling as he looked at Zhou Yuan. "I'll invite Chen Yang to dinner tomorrow," Zhou Yuan said with a smile. "Thank you, Brother Cheng. Thank you, Brother Zhou," Gao Hai said, pulling 2 packs of cigarettes from his pocket and handing one to Chung Xing and the other to Zhou Yuan. Chung Xing and Zhou Yuan accepted them without hesitation. Chung Xing took one out, and Gao Hai pulled out a lighter, walked over, and lit it for him with a snap. "Then I'll leave tomorrow's matter to Brother Chung and Brother Zhou," Gao Hai said with a smile. Although Chung Xing had given the reins to Zhou Yuan, Gao Hai knew that whether Chen Yang would give him face depended on Chung Xing. If it weren't for Chung Xing's backing, even if Zhou Yuan knew Chen Yang, Zhou Yuan wouldn't be able to handle the conflict between him and Chen Yang. Just then, the sound of a door locking came from the side, and Zhang Luxi walked over. She looked up at them, then quietly walked past them. Who is this girl? She's not even afraid of us? Gao Hai asked in surprise. Who do you think you are? Some kind of ruthless gangster, huh? Everyone avoids you like the plague. Cheng Xing retorted irritably upon hearing this guy's childish words. However, thinking about how he would react the same way to girls when he was the same age, he probably would have the same thoughts as Gao Hai. In high school, Cheng Xing was definitely a tough guy. Most people wouldn't dare offend him easily. Also, don't bother me with your messes anymore. Solve your own problems. For the next period of time, I'm going to focus on my studies, Cheng Xing said to Gao Hai. After saying that, Cheng Xing left first. Do you believe what Brother Cheng said? Gao Hai asked Zhou Yuan. I didn't believe it yesterday, but I do today, Zhou Yuan said with a smile, then followed Cheng Xing. From the start of self-study this morning, Cheng Xing had been studying non-stop, barely even having time to go to the bathroom. He'd studied for 6 or 7 whole periods. Zhou Yuan always believed that if Cheng Xing was willing to do something, he would definitely succeed. Walking down to the teaching building, past one sycamore tree after another, he saw a pretty figure standing at the school gate. See, I told you, Chen Qing was just being reserved, feeling shy. Look, she's still standing at the gate waiting for you to walk home together, Zhou Yuan said with a smile. I won't disturb you two. I'll go first. With that, Zhou Yuan got up and ran off. Hey! Cheng Xing was about to call after him when he realized Zhou Yuan had already run to the school gate, greeted Chen Qing, and disappeared. Cheng Xing could only shake his head and give up. Originally, Cheng Xing had been thinking of taking a stroll with him today. In the past, he hadn't often walked home with Zhou Yuan after school, because in this life, Zhou Yuan would always complain about it when he was drunk, saying that Cheng Xing valued women over friends. Reaching the school gate, Cheng Xing greeted Chen Qing, who was standing there, with a smile. Still here? Cheng Xing said with a smile. Waiting for you. Chen Qing brushed a strand of hair ruffled by the autumn wind behind her ear and smiled at him. Cheng Xing paused, stunned. Those words pulled him back to more than 10 years ago. On this day in his past life, Cheng Xing had been very angry after being rejected by Chen Qing. But that very night, Chen Qing stood at the school gate and said, "Wait for me," which made all of Cheng Xing's resentment vanish without a trace. The two families were very close. Cheng Xing's home was very close to Chen Qing's. They had attended the same junior high school. Once, during a family gathering, Chen Qing's mother mentioned that they were both very busy with work and couldn't pick Chen Qing up after school every night, worrying about her walking alone at night. Upon hearing this, Cheng Xing immediately volunteered, saying that he and Chen Qing were in the same school and class, and he could walk her home first every day before going home himself. Chen Qing's mother naturally agreed with a smile. Because of this, from then on, for all 3 years of junior high and high school, Cheng Xing would follow Chen Qing home every night, making sure she was safely home before going home himself. 6 years of unwavering dedication are unforgettable, but this dedication only made Cheng Xing more carefree now. No need, Cheng Xing said with a smile. The moon is quite round tonight. I can walk by myself. Chen Qing paused, watching Cheng Xing's disappearing figure. She wanted to chase after him and say something, but ultimately didn't. Gazing at the dim night sky, she suddenly felt a sense of loss. However, that feeling was fleeting. In her mind, waiting for Cheng Xing to walk together was merely out of politeness. After all, They always walked home together before. There was no other reason. Besides, Chengxing's behavior just now was probably because he was angry about being rejected today. But anger is only temporary. The two had argued before, but it would only last a day or two at most before Chengxing would take the initiative to make up. Thinking this, Chengxing walked home in the autumn breeze. After arriving home, Chengxing put down the book she had brought from school and bent down to change into slippers. "My dear daughter, you're back," Chengxing's father, Chen Shu, said with a smile. "Yes, Dad. I'll show you a poem later," Chengxing said. "No rush. Your mom went out to buy fruit. Go take a shower first, and after you shower, eat some fruit, and then Dad will look at your poem," Chen Shu said with a smile. "No way," Chengxing shook her head. "I have to look at it now. I can still remember it now, but I'm afraid I'll forget it in a little while." She had classmates sitting on either side of her at school. Although she thought Chengxing's poem was very well written when the homeroom teacher read it aloud, she didn't dare copy it down at school. If her classmates found out, she'd be in big trouble. So when she got home, she wanted to copy it down immediately, while she still remembered it, and show it to her father. Her father was the director of the Municipal Bureau of Culture. He certainly knew more about poetry and such than she did. All right, then I'll listen to my darling daughter. Let's look at it now," Chen Shu said with a smile. Chengxing took the paper and pen, and then wrote down the poem Chengxing had written that day. Her memory was excellent. After listening to it once, she silently recited it several times in her mind. Good poems all have one thing in common. They are easy to recite and memorize, so they weren't that difficult. After Chengxing finished writing, she handed the poem to Chen Shu. Chen Shu took the poem and looked at it. His smiling face gradually turned serious. After a long while, he said, "Xiaoqing, this shouldn't be a poem you wrote yourself, right?" Chengxing sometimes wrote some ancient and modern poems for him to see. Although what she wrote at her age was already excellent, it was clearly incomparable to this Song Dynasty poem in his hand. There are 2 lines in this poem that could be considered famous. "No," Chengxing shook her head, not hiding anything, and said, "This was written by Chengxing." "Chengxing, the boy from Chengchuan's family?" Chen Shu asked in surprise. "Yes," Chengxing nodded. "That's not right. Wasn't it said that his grades were very bad? Yesterday, your mother told me that the reason he got into the top high school was because Chengchuan spent money and pulled strings to get him in. Yesterday, your mother also told me that the decision she made to have him walk you home alone at night in junior high school was a mistake. She said you should stay away from him in the future and not be influenced by him." Chen Shu smiled. "Well, his overall academic performance isn't good, but his Chinese is excellent. His compositions are almost always perfect," Chengxing said. "Then this child from the Cheng family isn't as bad as your mother makes him out to be. This poem, Po Zhenzi, is exceptionally well written. I doubt even the writers in our city's Writers Association could write such a good poem," Chen Shu said. Chengxing was taken aback. She knew Chengxing's poem was excellent, but she hadn't expected her father to praise it so highly, even thinking that the writers in the Writers Association couldn't write such a good poem. After speaking, Chen Shu gave his beloved daughter a meaningful look and smiled. However, the first stanza is fairly normal, but the second stanza seems to contain a declaration of love. I wonder who Chengxing wrote this poem for. If it weren't for getting bogged down in petty sentimentality, the second half of this poem could be just as good as the first, and the overall quality of this Po Zhenzi could be even higher. Chengxing blushed slightly and said, "Oh dear Dad, what are you saying?" "What I'm saying is understood by others," Chen Shu said with a smile. "Understand what? I understand nothing," Chengxing said, pursing her lips. Chen Shu smiled. Chengxing had been with Chen Qing through 6 years of middle and high school, rain or shine. How could they, as parents, not know Chengxing's thoughts? Otherwise, Chen Qing's mother wouldn't have said those things to him yesterday. It was just a pity. Although Chengxing wasn't as bad as Chen Qing's mother had described yesterday, he was still just bad. Although his poems were good, his overall grades were indeed poor. With his grades in other subjects, even if he did well in Chinese, he wouldn't get into a good university. And high school is not university. Although Chengxing's family had some money, and he could spend a couple 100,000 yuan to pull some strings to get into a decent high school, university was a different story. No matter how well you write, it's useless if you can't get into a good university, unless you're truly exceptionally talented enough to write those nationally acclaimed perfect score essays in the college entrance exam. But how many people like that are there in the whole country? Rarely at all, even fewer than the top scorers in each province. However, Chen Shi looked at the poem in his hand and liked it more and more. The Provincial Cultural Department was requesting submissions of good poems from various regions, with 2 to be selected for publication in the provincial newspaper. Chen Shi had been collecting some from the Writers' Association over the past few days, but none were satisfactory. He figured he might as well submit this one. Whether it would be selected for publication was another matter, but at least it wouldn't be embarrassing. For years, the province had requested submissions of good poems and articles from various regions for publication in the provincial newspaper. Not only hadn't a single work from Anchang been published, but every time, their submissions were consistently ranked last. As the director of the Anchang Cultural Bureau, Chen Shi felt truly bitter. But he couldn't be blamed. Anchang's economy was poor. It was difficult for Anchang to produce good writers, and even those with good writing skills had moved to more economically developed cities. Who would stay in this poor, remote place? So how can a municipal writers' association like this compare to those in the top-performing cities in terms of economy? If the Municipal Writers' Association can't compete, then naturally the articles produced by its writers can't compare either. What are you 2 talking about? Just as the father and daughter were chatting, Chen Qing's mother walked in from outside. I saw there was a fruit vendor at the entrance of the community, so I bought some. I'll go wash it, and you can try some later, said Chen Qing's mother, Zhang Qiu. Thank you for your trouble, mother, Chen Qing said with a smile and a bow. Go away, you're asking for a beating, Chen Qing's mother laughed. Unable to walk home with Zhou Yuan, Chengxing strolled slowly, admiring the night view of Anchang from over a decade ago. Anchang at that time didn't have the towering skyscrapers of later years. The tallest buildings were only 20 or 30 stories high, and there weren't many of them. Most were small, scattered buildings of only a few stories, but this was the Anchang of Chengxing's youthful memories. Without the bright lights of later years, the city seemed somewhat desolate under the autumn wind. The dim streetlights flickered on and off. In those 10 years when public safety wasn't great, it was no wonder Chen Qing's mother worried about Chen Qing walking alone at night. Actually, their home wasn't far from the school. Anchang No. 1 High School, as the best high school in Anchang, had a history of nearly 100 years. Its location was also excellent, situated in a relatively prosperous area of the city. Other high schools, even Anchang No. 4 High School, whose reputation and teaching quality were gradually catching up, were still located in relatively remote areas of the city. Because it's close by, Chengxing and his classmates don't need to ride bicycles home. Even if he walks, if he's just heading home and not playing around or stopping along the way, it only takes about 10 minutes. Some students who live farther from school have to ride their bicycles for 20 or 30 minutes after school to get home. Therefore, some students, even those living in the city, choose to stay at school for convenience, and only go home on weekends. Chengxing had heard that Zhang Luxi's home was quite far from school. She had to ride her bicycle for over an hour to get home. What was puzzling was that even so, Zhang Luxi didn't choose to stay at school. Anyway, Chengxing simply couldn't bring himself to ride his bicycle for over 2 hours round trip every day. The autumn night was a bit chilly. Chengxing, wearing only a thin, short-sleeved shirt, felt a chill in the wind and quickened his pace towards home. But when he reached the door, Chengxing stopped. There's a saying, near home, yet filled with trepidation. Having traveled from 2023 to 2010, returning to the warm home of his memories, about to see his parents in their prime, how could Chengxing not be excited? Even including his previous life, Chengxing hadn't seen his parents in a long time. To avoid their pressure to get married and the nagging of relatives, and because he was quite busy with work, Chengxing rarely went home except for Chinese New Year. But even so, he couldn't escape the blind dates his mother arranged for him every day. These blind dates, like those before his rebirth, happened almost every month or two. Chengxing didn't want to go against his mother's good intentions, so he could only go along with them perfunctorily. Reaching 30 and still unmarried, it wasn't that Chengxing didn't want to get married, but rather that he simply hadn't met someone he liked. In that materialistic age, finding one's inner peace was a rare and precious thing. This is why so many people with excellent qualities didn't want to get married. Everyone longed to meet someone they liked who also liked them, but such people were incredibly hard to find. Why hasn't Chengxing come back yet? This was his mother, Deng Ying's voice. What's the rush? Chengxing has to take Chengqing home after school, so he won't be back so soon, said Chengxing's father, Cheng Chuan. That's true. If only Chengxing could actually marry Xiaoqing. I like Xiaoqing more and more each day. She's smart, beautiful, and comes from a good family. We know her well too, Deng Ying said with a smile from inside the room. If his grades were any better, I'd believe you. But with his grades, and Chen Shi and the others from scholarly families, he has absolutely no chance. Forget it. Let's not talk about this anymore. It makes me angry, Chengxing's father, Cheng Chuan, said. So what about grades? Grades don't put food on the table. You only went to junior high and you're doing well now, aren't you? Deng Ying said with some dissatisfaction. Could he have my foresight and luck? I caught the wave of reform and opening up, made my first fortune in business, and with that money, I was able to develop my business in my hometown, thanks to favorable policies, Cheng Chuan said. Back then, when I first made money, some people were short-sighted, thinking that since I was making money in the big city, why should I return to my small hometown? They argued with me about it every day. If they had listened to you then, would our family be doing so well now? Cheng Chuan scoffed. Stop bragging. I just think my son will definitely be better than you in the future. And? Deng Ying frowned and asked, who are you calling short-sighted? Who else could it be? It's definitely me, Cheng Chuan said with a forced smile. Chengxing, who had been listening outside for a long time, smiled helplessly and then pushed open the door and went inside. These kinds of arguments had started when Chengxing was a child and had basically never stopped. But no matter how much they argued, in the end, it was always his father who had to apologize. Mom and Dad, I'm home. Looking at his parents sitting on the sofa waiting for him to come home from school, Chengxing forced a smile, fighting back tears. If it were just seeing his parents from his future life, Chengxing would also be excited, but he wouldn't feel this urge to cry. But these faces of his parents, faces that only existed in his youthful memories, evoked so many memories for him. These memories are rarely triggered in daily life. Even in dreams, you seldom dream of them. You might dream of your old school, a girl you once liked, or some silly things you did in your student days, but you rarely dream of those two young, familiar faces from your youthful memories. In this world, no one spends more time with you than your parents. So when memories flood back, those fragmented images paint a picture of over 20 years. How could Chengxing not be moved? Rebirth evokes memories far beyond just school. It also includes the city you lived in, the silly things you did, the faded photographs, the songs and movies you loved back then, and your parents who were still young then. All of these, combined, constitute youth. Why are you so late? Do you know how worried your mother was? Cheng Chuan asked, frowning. Since Deng Ying played the positive role, Cheng Chuan often had to play the more serious, negative role in this family. And Chengxing really was late this time. Even if he had to take Chengqing home, he would have been home half an hour earlier than today. Deng Ying was genuinely anxious. It wouldn't have been so bad before, but the key was that many school tragedies had occurred in China in the past 10 years. Seeing that Chengxing hadn't returned home made Deng Ying anxious. "I'm sorry, Mom and Dad. I made you worry," Chengxing apologized earnestly. He had talked with Gao Hai and the others in the hallway after school, which delayed him. On the way home, he hadn't been in a hurry, stopping frequently to look at the familiar yet unfamiliar buildings of Ancheng, because he was late. However, Cheng Chuan and Deng Ying were stunned when they heard Chengxing's apology. When had Chengxing ever apologized to them? Normally, if Cheng Chuan said that, Chengxing would probably argue back, but he would never utter an apology. Therefore, Deng Ying quickly said, "It wasn't that late. Maybe Chengqing's parents kept him behind for a chat when he took Chengqing home." "Yeah, your mom will worry if you come home too late. Come home earlier after school from now on. Go wash up, take a shower, and go to bed early," Cheng Chuan said. "Okay, Mom and Dad. You have to go to work tomorrow, so go to bed early too," Chengxing said. Okay, Deng Ying said with a "Yes," Chengxing replied. "Why are you up so early?" Deng Ying glanced at the clock in the room. It was only a little past 5. "I couldn't sleep," Chengxing answered truthfully. He really couldn't sleep. Having just been reborn into this world, Chengxing was eager to see the world he remembered. He was like a child who had received a new toy, impatient to greet it and say good morning. "Then wait here. I'll give you the money for food," Deng Ying said. "No need, Mom. I still have money on me," Chengxing said. He still had over 1,000 yuan in his wallet. He was just a high school student, and this was 2010. 1,000 yuan was a considerable sum. You're already in your final year of high school, and it's only the beginning of the semester. This is the time to use money to build relationships with your classmates. I'll give you some more, Deng Ying said. Mom, you can go back to sleep. Really, no need. I'm leaving now. With that, Chengxing closed the door and left the house. It was past 5 o'clock, still dark, but Chengxing felt no sleepiness whatsoever. There was another reason Chengxing got up so early. He suddenly remembered the steamed bun shop near the entrance of No. 1 High School. As a northerner, Chengxing loved noodles, and that steamed bun shop near Oncheng No. 1 High School was the best he remembered from his youth. He had even gone back to look for it during the school's anniversary celebration in his later life, but the owner had long since closed down. Chengxing was already starving. The last time he ate was last afternoon after school, a long time ago. When he was hungry, he suddenly remembered the delicious food he used to eat. Naturally, Chengxing couldn't fall asleep anymore. Upon arriving near the high school, the streets were already lined with countless food stalls. However, since it was still early, there weren't many students. Chengxing walked through the dense array of food stalls and arrived at the steamed bun shop. Aside from the owner and his wife busy at work, there was no one else in the shop. Chengxing found a seat. What would you like to eat? We have steamed dumplings and steamed buns, the owner asked with a smile, putting down what he was doing. 2 meat buns and 2 vegetable buns, and a bowl of soy milk, please, Chengxing said. What kind of vegetable buns do you want? The shopkeeper asked. 1 with vermicelli and 1 with tofu, Chengxing replied with a smile. The shopkeeper nodded and took the buns from the steamer for him. A short while later, the shopkeeper served him a bowl of soy milk. Chengxing found a small bowl and put some chili oil in it. Chung-Sing dipped a steamed bun in chili sauce and took a bite. It tasted just like he remembered. It was delicious. Chung-Sing began to eat heartily, quickly digesting all 4 buns. Finally, he drank the now cold soy milk, concluding his blissfully happy breakfast. After breakfast, Chung-Sing paid and went to school. However, when he arrived at the classroom door and saw it was still locked, Chung-Sing realized he was indeed a little early. Usually, he could hear the students reading aloud from a distance when he arrived at the classroom. Chung-Sing leaned against the railing in the corridor, waiting for someone to open the door. The railing in the corridor of the teaching building was Chung-Sing's favorite spot. It offered a wide view, allowing him to see most of the school campus, and in the sweltering summer, it provided a refreshing breeze to dissipate some of the heat. A figure appeared beneath the deserted school building. Chung-Sing looked over and saw Zhang Luxi riding her bicycle into the school gate. Chung-Sing was taken aback. He glanced at his watch and realized it was only 5:30. If she had to cycle for an hour to get to school, wouldn't she have to get up at 4 a.m.? Therefore, her success in her later life made sense. It was simply that she had consistently gotten up at 4 a.m. every day for the past few years, and then cycled for an hour to get to school early. This perseverance and willpower were beyond the reach of ordinary people. Chung-Sing watched quietly as she pushed her bicycle into the bike shed, then watched her lock it and come up from downstairs with her books. The sky was still dark, and the moon's shadow could still be seen on the distant horizon. Zhang Luxi stepped lightly onto the stairs of the teaching building. But there was no reaction. The lights in the stairwell didn't turn on with her light step. Looking at the still dark stairwell, Zhang Luxi pressed harder on her foot. Only then did the lights in the stairwell come on. Chung-Sing watched the lights flicker in and out of the stairwell until a figure appeared on the third-floor corridor. If he could roughly guess who she was from her silhouette based on the moonlight and some streetlights below, the dim light in the stairwell made Zhang Luxi clearly visible now. She was wearing a white short-sleeved t-shirt and washed denim jeans. Simple, yet exuding a youthful aura that belonged only to bygone eras. If students a decade or two from now, regardless of gender, prefer loose-fitting casual pants, then today's students, both boys and girls, almost universally wear jeans. Moreover, most people like jeans with holes or slits in the front. More avant-garde and daring girls might even show a large slit at the knee. Chen Qing particularly likes jeans with slits at the knees, as if they've been cut with scissors. Zhang Luxi's slightly faded jeans, however, have nothing on them. The early autumn wind swept through the corridor, brushing against the stray hairs beside her face. On that delicate face, you couldn't see any flaws. There were no elaborate words or phrases to embellish it. Even Chung-Sing, a best-selling author of youth literature in his previous life, even someone who had written countless heroines and used a plethora of beautiful words to describe their appearances, would probably only utter one sentence at this moment. "She's really beautiful." The hallway light suddenly went out, leaving a final sliver of golden light on her delicate face. Chung-Sing watched her approach until she drew near and saw him slumped in the corridor. A flicker of surprise crossed Zhang Luxi's calm eyes. At this time, she wouldn't be surprised if anyone appeared at the classroom door, but Chung-Sing was an exception. He always arrived either near the end of morning self-study or after it had already ended. Yesterday, arriving before the bell rang for morning self-study was already quite surprising, not to mention that it was still dark, and there was still more than half an hour before morning self-study started. But none of this mattered to her. All she wanted was to focus on her studies, because education was now her only chance to change her family's fate. Therefore, as long as it didn't interfere with her studies, anything that happened at school was irrelevant. A little distance from Chung-Sing, Zhang Luxi opened her book to the English vocabulary section and began to quietly memorize it. Yes, quietly. Chung Xing could see her left cheek moving, but there wasn't a sound in the quiet corridor. Chung Xing didn't want to interrupt her quiet reciting English vocabulary, but it wasn't even 5:40 yet, still a long way from morning self-study. He didn't know who kept the key to the classroom, but it certainly wasn't Zhang Luxi. If it were her, she would have already opened the door. "Hello, classmate," Chung Xing greeted her, his first greeting since they became classmates in their second year of high school. Zhang Luxi looked up at him, a questioning glint in her usually cool and indifferent eyes. But for many good students at No. 1 high school, wasn't Chung Xing the same? They had virtually no interaction with him, only knowing that those who often bullied them were subservient to him, not daring to even breathe loudly. This led to many misconceptions about Chung Xing, assuming that if those people behaved like that in front of him, then Chung Xing himself must be even more arrogant and domineering. Therefore, many people were afraid of Chung Xing. This is why Zhou Hai was so surprised yesterday when he saw Zhang Luxi calmly walk past them. Because Zhou Hai was in their class, and many people would avoid him. This incident finally ended when Zhang Huan, who had the keys, arrived. "Why are you so slow? I've been waiting here for 20 minutes. Anger can be transferred and vented, and Chung Xing, whose anger had been simmering for so long because of Zhang Luxi's words, naturally vented it all on Zhang Huan, the dormitory head of Class 3, who had just arrived. "Brother Cheng, it's only 5:50. Our morning self-study doesn't start until 6:20. I've gotten here fast enough, and I didn't even know you were up so early today," Zhang Huan said, looking aggrieved. "Why don't you go talk to our homeroom teacher for me and ask him to give the key to someone else? I don't want to handle this key for even a day anymore. In my first year of high school, I could sleep in a few extra minutes every day, but now in my second year, I haven't had a single good night's sleep," Zhang Huan said. "All right, enough complaining. Open the door," Chung Xing urged. Zhang Huan took the key out of his pocket and opened the door. School keys are usually given to boarding students. This is to prevent problems if day students forget their keys or can't come due to family matters. Boarding students, even if they forget their keys, can quickly return to their dorms to retrieve them. Furthermore, in high school classes, boarding students are usually the first to arrive at the classroom. Zhang Huan getting up wasn't late. Even at this time, there were only a few scattered students left in the school. The students from the neighboring classes 2 and 4 hadn't arrived yet. Entering the classroom and sitting down, Chung Xing took Zhou Yuan's Chinese textbook from the drawer. Finding the poems and articles he had forgotten, Chung Xing began to slowly recite them. After all, his rebirth wasn't in elementary or middle school, or even the first year of high school. With less than a year until the college entrance exam, it would be quite challenging for Chung Xing to catch up on all his previous courses and get into a good university. Chinese was manageable, but the main challenge was math, physics, and chemistry. He needed to catch up not only on high school subjects, but also on middle school ones. He needs remedial tutoring, even for elementary school equations, perhaps even those from 5th or 6th grade, because he doesn't understand them either. You could say his math skills are limited to addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. When it comes to equations, his brain starts to malfunction. In other words, he has to spend a year catching up on 6 years of someone else's curriculum. It's a bit intense, but these are indeed some of Chung Xing's biggest regrets. Not getting into university, not having a romantic relationship in college. This isn't just Chung Xing's regret. It's probably the regret of many who stop short of university. In the morning, Chung Xing started to get bored. Zhou Yuan's only remaining Chinese textbook was practically worn out from being read so many times. During the third period, math class, Chung Xing glanced at Zhou Yuan. He noticed a thick book on top of Zhou Yuan's math textbook. This book was as thick as several math textbooks. Chung Xing reached out and picked it up, discovering it was a pirated copy of a novel called The Ultimate Young Master. Looking at the cover, Chung Xing realized he had read this book before. It was one of the classic gangster novels of this era, featuring the protagonist, Ye Wudao. Many people might not be familiar with this title. This was the author of the later classic, The Snow Sword. However, this book was an unfinished work. 10 years ago, online literature wasn't as strictly regulated as it would be later. Gangsters, officialdom, and even some explicit Liu Bei-themed stories were all allowed to be written about. Although Cheng Xing rose to fame through traditional literature, he had read quite a few online novels. Although most online novels lack the rigor of traditional literature and are often inferior in writing style, with a wide range of quality, reading these novels is primarily about seeking enjoyment in a fast-paced life. Therefore, it's not necessary to be overly concerned with the plot and logic. So even in his later years, Cheng Xing would still find time to read a few good online novels. In an era when mobile phones could barely be used for playing card games like Du Di Zhu, a popular Chinese card game, online novels were the only form of entertainment for many students on campus. "Brother Cheng, look, I'm reading on my phone." Zhou Yuan took a flip phone from his drawer, piled all the books in front of him, and started reading an online novel. Cheng Xing casually flipped through it. Although he found the works uninteresting from a modern perspective, given the incomprehensible symbols on the blackboard, this was the only way to pass the time. After his morning classes, Cheng Xing took a taxi to a Xinhua bookstore in the city. "Boss, do you still have high school textbooks?" Cheng Xing asked. "No, sold out," the owner replied. "When will you have them?" Cheng Xing asked. "We probably won't have any for the next couple of days. If you want to buy some, come back on Saturday." With the start of the new school year, many high school seniors who will be taking the college entrance exam next year have lost their old books, so there's been a lot of demand for textbooks lately. "We sold out several days ago," the owner replied. "What about the other bookstores?" Cheng Xing asked again. "Probably the same," the bookstore owner replied. Cheng Xing then took a taxi to several other bookstores in the city. Sure enough, all the books on high school textbooks were sold out. Not only high school textbooks, but also many middle school textbooks were sold out because many junior high students were facing the high school entrance exam and wanted to study hard in their final year to try and get into a good high school. Only some geography and biology books remained. It seems I'll have to wait until Saturday to come back and check. These junior high books aren't very useful to him, so Cheng Xing ended up only taking 2 elementary school math books from 5th or 6th grade. Returning to the school gate with 2 elementary school math books in hand, Cheng Xing gazed at the dazzling array of snacks displayed outside. He wondered what to eat. He wanted to try many of the dishes. In his many dreams from his later life, the various food stalls near his high school were frequent haunts. Its appearance rate was almost as frequent as the classroom, the indistinct outline of Zhongluxi, and the school playground. The school did have a cafeteria, but the food wasn't very good. And it wasn't just the #1 high school cafeteria. The food in many school cafeterias in Ancheng was generally unappetizing. Therefore, these day students living off campus were essentially the earliest food delivery workers in the country. Many boarding students who didn't want to eat at the school cafeteria would give day students some travel money to bring them food back. Of course, if you were popular, or a girl, you could save that money. Cheng Xing smiled as he looked at the numerous meals carried by the students. Cheng Xing didn't bring food for anyone at school, not even for money. But throughout junior high and high school, he proactively brought food for Chen Qing many times. Sometimes Chen Qing wouldn't want to leave the classroom and would ask Cheng Xing to bring her a meal. Although she would always give Cheng Xing the money for the meals, he never accepted it. Back then, Cheng Xing, in his somewhat immature way, thought that Chen Qing was definitely his, that no one could take her away, and that she would marry him in the future. Therefore, bringing food for his future wife every day and following her safely home seemed like the most natural thing to do. After all, although many people had pursued Chen Qing over the years, only he had the honor of doing so. Youth is so unforgettable, because on this journey, no one knows what the destination is. The first passengers on this train, Whether experiencing budding love or forging trust in friendship, are young people just coming of age, giving their true selves to the world for the first time. The scene evoked memories, and Cheng Xing inevitably thought of some things from the past, even though Chen Qing no longer stirred any emotions in him. But after all, it was the first time the young Cheng Xing, just coming of age, had liked a girl. Cheng Xing pulled himself out of his thoughts and chose a ramen shop from among the many restaurants lining the street. He remembered that the ramen shop next to his high school was delicious. It was a place he and Zhou Yuan frequented many times. It could be said that Cheng Xing's good impression of Lancheng ramen was all thanks to this ramen shop next to his high school. In his later life, when eating ramen elsewhere, the taste was nowhere near as good as the ramen from his school days, so Cheng Xing rarely went to ramen shops anymore. Cheng Xing remembered the prices at this ramen shop: 4 yuan for a large bowl and 3 yuan for a small bowl. Cheng Xing walked into the shop. He wondered if all ramen shops in Lanzhou were the same. A woman wearing a headscarf was stir-frying vegetables in the sweltering heat. A man was kneading dough, and a child was doing homework at an empty table. Cheng Xing simply came in and ordered a large bowl of ramen. The couple ignored him and started chatting in their dialect. Cheng Xing seemed to have seen this scene many times before. They were like NPCs in a game. The child was quiet and still, doing his homework peacefully. He sat down in an empty seat and took his phone out of his pocket. A phone from 2010 was a transitional device. A few years prior, Nokia phones were practically weapons. A phone that could play music and watch videos was considered good enough. A few years later, it was the era of smartphones. Cheng Xing's phone could connect to the internet, log into QQ, or take photos and videos. Just don't expect too much from the camera quality. It certainly couldn't compare to the hundreds of millions of pixels in phones from major domestic manufacturers in later years. The charger was a universal charger. It might take overnight to fully charge. It couldn't compare to the 100-watt fast charging of later generations. However, seeing something from over a decade ago again was still quite interesting. Cheng Xing opened QQ on his phone. The classic QQ. 2010 logo appeared on the screen. He entered his QQ number and password. It simply displayed that the input was incorrect. Cheng Xing thought for a moment and realized that his Q password in 2010 was still the number CQ 199312225. This QQQ password had been with him throughout his student years, and he only changed it several years after graduating from high school. Cheng Xing logged into QQ and changed his password. Once logged in, he discovered a Q space option on the homepage. Cheng Xing had always assumed that Q space was a feature only available on smartphones in later generations. Cheng Xing clicked the QQ space button, and a loading screen appeared, but it was incredibly slow, like trying to search for something on an old-fashioned computer. However, as the saying goes, you get what you pay for. Compared to the hundreds of yuan a month just for data in later generations, 5 yuan for 30 megabytes was a great deal. Of course, if that 30 megabytes for 5 yuan were in later generations, very few people could afford it. After the long loading screen finished, Cheng Xing finally saw his QQ space. However, a few minutes later, he deleted all the content from it. Since QQ is rarely used in later generations, Cheng Xing's QQQ account was left unattended. He never imagined that he would have posted so much cringeworthy stuff there back then. 3. There wasn't much else. The posts on his QQQ space were mostly related to Chen Qing. There were straightforward declarations of love like, "I like you," as well as some subtle love poems. Besides that, there were some blog entries, but most of them were also about Chen Qing. Perhaps it wasn't a big deal for a teenager to boldly express his love through QQ, or showcase his literary talent with love poems. But looking back from a middle-aged perspective, it only brought shame and embarrassment. After deleting those posts, Cheng Xing's ramen was ready. Cheng Xing put down his phone, brought back the ramen he had made, added a spoonful of chili, and started eating. After finishing the large bowl of ramen, Cheng Xing took a sip of the broth, then picked up the books from the table and went back to the classroom. "Brother Cheng, where did you go just now? After helping Gao Hai with his business at noon, Gao Hai wanted to treat us to lunch, but we looked for you for a long time and couldn't find you. We thought you went to the internet cafe, but we didn't see you there either," Zhou Yuan asked. "I went to the bookstore and bought a few books," Cheng Xing said. "What books? Another good novel? Let me see. I just finished reading Pan Long, and I haven't found any good novels yet," Zhou Yuan said. "Are you sure you want to read them?" Cheng Xing asked. Yes, I want to read them. The novels Brother Cheng buys are definitely of good quality." Zhou Yuan nodded. "Speaking of quality, they're definitely better than any novel you've read before." Cheng Xing handed him the 2 5th and 6th grade math books he had bought. These were books compiled by tens of thousands of people using countless hours of wisdom. Naturally, few books in the world could compare in quality to the 9-year compulsory education standard experimental textbooks. However, Zhou Yuan was dumbfounded when he took the books. "This elementary school math?" Zhou Yuan asked. "Yes." Cheng Xing nodded. "Then I'll read The Ultimate Playboy again," Zhou Yuan said. As he spoke, he took out his copy of The Ultimate Playboy, which he had read countless times. Chongqing smiled, took the book, and continued flipping through it. However, even with just 5th or 6th grade math, Chongqing was completely bewildered. He stared at it for a while, his hands twirling his hair countless times. He had thought that if it was just 5th or 6th grade math, he could learn it on his own, by looking at the examples and teaching demonstrations. But in fact, he was overthinking it. Without someone explaining it to him, he still wouldn't understand these equations.